Welcome, welcome, welcome to Dialogue, a true crime conversation. I'm Rebecca Sebastian, this show's host, and we're continuing along in this summer series where I am putting up here on the main feed previously recorded episodes from TRIALOGUE, which is a Patreon-only exclusive show focused entirely on court cases. So today is really fun because it tackles one of my favorite topics, which if anyone is guessing right now, you would be right if you said cults. You'd be even more right if you said NXIVM. Sarah Berman has been on the podcast, and what you might not know is that I kept her on a little longer than you previously heard her, and we talked specifically about what happened during Allison Mack's trial. Now, what's fun is Sarah Berman and I actually got to meet up last month in New York City. She's Canadian, but she came down for Allison Mack's sentencing. So it's really cool to hear this now because we talk about the sentence of Allison Mack and what it might be, and now of course we know that. So this is just a fun little window into an extension of our bigger conversation about the cult that is NXIVM, specifically Keith Raniere and Allison Mack, and those blurry lines between perpetrator and victim. Please enjoy my conversation with Sarah Berman, and if you haven't already, please follow me on social media at Dialogue Pod on Twitter and Instagram, and sign up for my newsletter because a big announcement regarding this here podcast is coming next week. A week from today, if you're listening to this on release day, that date would be August 25th, will be coming. So I will announce it here on the podcast, I will announce it on social media, and I will be sending out an email. So I would love to have email as a way to communicate with you moving forward. So again, the link to my website will be in the show notes, as will Sarah Berman's book, Don't Call It a Cult. Provocative title, it's totally a cult. She thinks so, I think so, we all know it. Please enjoy this conversation with Sarah Berman. Hey diehards, welcome to TRIALOGUE, a courtroom conversation. This is an exclusive Patreon-only companion podcast, and what you're about to hear is a continuation of my conversation. I feel like I have to say something with Nation, with Sarah Berman. I had her on Dialogue this week, but this part of the conversation is just for you all, and it's about her time in the courtroom. She was actually in attendance in court in Brooklyn for the entirety of Keith Raniere's trial. So we talk about appeals, the sentencing, her predictions for the remaining defendants, and also what it was like to see both Daniela, who was a key witness, and Keith himself in person. So I really think this is a good one. Thank you so much for your support. Enjoy the continuation of my conversation with Sarah Berman here on TRIALOGUE. Thank you guys. This was a long journey for you then, because if you started speaking with her in 2017, the trial was 2019.
Yeah.
So were you just reporting for Vice, kind of keeping updated and writing pieces on it through that time period?
Yeah, so there was a ton of breaks in the case in 2019. You had a bunch of people pleading, and then you finally had, 6 weeks of trial, almost 7 weeks. And then after that, it was like, searching around and trying to get sort of reactions from the people who were mentioned in court, right? Like I did a visit to Albany and kind of tried to visit, where they played volleyball. And
so weird.
I took little photos of, like Nancy Salzman's parking space. But yeah, it was a very busy time. And then it went quiet for another year while we waited for sentencings to happen. And we're still waiting on sentencing. So this case, it's always evolving. We're going to probably see an appeal from Keith Raniere. We've got an appeal from Claire Bronfman as well. And then we've got this legal case of ex-members, suing for damages for everything that happened to them. So despite being done with the book for now, I also still feel committed to sort of covering this as it develops, because there's just always so much more to learn.
Yeah, I don't think this is the last we're going to hear about it for sure. Now, do you think the appeals have actual legal standing, or are they kind of your run-of-the-mill, everybody appeals, so he's going to as well?
Yeah, so in Raniere's case, he's switched legal teams and he's, seems to be leaning towards this reason that the judge stopped testimony at one point. I mean, what a judge or what the Second Circuit is going to do, but it does feel like they're not bringing anything particularly new. The judge already had sort of a response to that. They tried to file for a mistrial during the trial because of
Yeah.
that, because testimony was cut off, and the judge had all kinds of, you could have asked to reopen it, just some run-of-the-mill sort of responses. I doubt that an appeal would sort of get over that kind of obstacle, but this case just is full of surprises, so who knows? Like, even the sentencing, 120 years, that was a huge surprise for even, the people closest to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Just when you kind of get your head around this story, something else will develop and shock you. Am I right in remembering that his new lawyer is the Bill Cosby attorney, or did I totally, or Weinstein's? Isn't it something weird like that?
Well, the firm that he had at trial had worked with Weinstein. It wasn't the same lawyer, but the same
Okay.
firm.
Okay.
But Mark Agnifilo has since actually moved on, and now he has this other team of lawyers, one of which was exonerated for murdering his family. So there's another
Wow.
sort of storied legal team involved.
Story within the story. Okay. I guess maybe that's what I was thinking of. I want to just talk court a little bit more. So you got to be physically in court for the trial. Were you present for the entire thing? Pretty
Yep,
much?
I attended every day of the trial, and then I went back as well for the sentencing.
Wow. And the sentencing, was that during COVID? Because I feel like I tried to get into that.
It was, yes. So it was very hard. I mean, thankfully, it was just before the second wave hit of 2020. And so I got
Yeah.
to sort of do a little quarantine for myself on either side. And yeah, only left my Airbnb to go to court, nothing else. And yeah, just tried to keep as safe as possible during that time.
God, what I would have given to be there when they handed down the sentence. Like, please tell me all about that moment. Did he have a visible look of shock? Did he seem to expect it? What was the vibe in the courtroom?
I mean, he barely gives away any emotion almost ever. If he does, it's like this sort of piercing intensity. Like sometimes he would just stare really hard at especially Lauren Salzman because she was the one that cooperated the most. And so he's just like staring absolute daggers at her through some of it. But most of it, he's just, taking notes, looking very blank faced, just showing, little notes to his lawyer. He actually was yelled at for talking during the testimony. So the judge really reamed him out for that at one point.
I don't
But
think he
just,
can help himself. He has to talk.
yeah, he doesn't like not being the center of attention, it seems.
Yeah.
But maybe 30 feet away in the press aisle, and yeah, usually got to look right in his eyes, but yeah, just not a lot there, not a lot going on. I don't think he was shocked when he did speak at his own sentencing. He had a very flat affect. He
Hmm.
seemed almost a little bumbling and confused because he was trying to say he was sorry for, people's bad feelings, but that he definitely didn't commit the crimes. And it just didn't really make sense. He was kind of coming off as like word salad. And the judge just was not having it. He was just like really done with this particular defendant. And yeah, it was really, I don't know how to describe, especially at the sentencing, it was just like, wow, he's just really done. Like, there's nothing left. Like, there's no ambiguity left.
Yeah. Yeah, that sentence spoke volumes. What do you predict for Allison Mack and Nancy Salzman's sentencing?
Really interesting to, yeah, try to speculate. I think both of them in some ways cooperated, um, and I mean, suggests that they may have a lesser sentence. Certainly Claire Bronfman, because she wanted to be on Keith's team, and the danger that posed sort of pushed the judge to issue a higher sentence. So I would say maybe the opposite dynamic could potentially be in effect, where they get less than the guideline. But it's so tough to say. They've also spent all this time under house arrest, and I'm not sure if that will be factored in.
Counting against time. So do you have a prediction or any intel on when their sentencing will happen? I feel like it's got to be soon.
The last time I talked to Nancy Salzman's lawyer was February, and he had no idea. He was like, maybe by May.
Wow.
Now it's May. So, but yeah, they haven't set any dates for these yet. I know that all of the defendants do want an in-person sentencing. They want the judge to look them in the eye when he gives the sentence. And because of COVID, that's just not really been possible. But I know that the courts are opening up. And so it is a little surprising at this point that something hasn't even been put in the calendar. But yeah, we can expect that certainly later this year. I don't know if there's anything more to say than that.
And where is their house arrest? Are they in New York State?
For Allison, she's in California with her parents.
Okay.
Yes, I think Nancy is in upstate. She's applied to be able to visit her parents and things like that at different times. But yes, they're more or less all upstate New York.
And I think they're good examples of the last thing I want to talk about, which is the differentiating point for some members of DOS who didn't get charged. Was that because they didn't know Keith Raniere was at the top when they were recruiting women to come into this smaller inner circle? How did Sarah Edmondson, India Oxenberg, etc., avoid criminal implications?
I mean, I think there are a bunch of reasons. I do know that India Oxenberg was ready to testify, and she did cooperate with the government. She provided some of the key evidence even. So there were different levels of cooperation, and yeah, there were definitely different levels of information known. So definitely India and Sarah, when they joined, did not know Keith was at the center of it. They often didn't know that, sexuality was going to be a component in any way. That was kept to certain women who really worked on that aspect. It's hard to say because there are also 8 women in the very inner circle who did know a lot more than the others, and only one of them has been charged, and that's Allison. And so the reason is hard to say. Some of them are in Mexico. It would be harder to extradite them. For someone like Nikki Klein, there might be a jurisdictional issue because, her slaves weren't necessarily in Brooklyn, like in the actual district that Allison recruited Nicole, who's one of the witnesses. She might have done her recruiting elsewhere, say in Albany, which is the northern district of New York.
Right.
So I think there's just sort of little technical reasons. And it's possible that charges could still come out of the northern district. That was never fully ruled out.
Wow.
It's a very complicated case, lots of little moving parts. Like I had to study racketeering law, and that was not my area of expertise before this, but now I feel a little bit more comfortable with it.
It's so crazy. And even as you said the word her slaves, I'm like, will it ever not be weird to say things like that? Like, oh, well, her slaves weren't in the vicinity, or branding. Like these just sort of like things we now say as part of this story that are just, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, you would never imagine talking about or working on, I'm sure.
It is insane. I mean, there is a precedent for it, like a tiny, in the fetish community, sometimes doms and subs use this language, but no, it is just historically important, especially in the context they're using it, where it's literally all of their belongings, all of their labor suddenly belonging to another person, like just the worst possible definition of it, where you're just like, how did anybody say yes to this? I fully follow you on the it gets you right in the gut no matter what.
Totally. We talked earlier about seeing Daniela's powerful testimony in court. Can you talk about what it was like to see her?
Yeah, so she had just sort of fire in her eyes, and she's so sharp, right? I guess when she first came to NXIVM, she had sort of insecurities about her weight. And so it is interesting to see that she now is just super slim, super glamorous. She had all these sort of cute asymmetrical outfits. She works in fashion now, and she just really was giving 150%, right? Like every day, just sort of walking in, her elbows and hips were sort of cutting the air. That's one of the lines that I use, because it just seemed like, yeah, a fire was lit under her, and she was one of the most eloquent folks who spoke at the trial.
Amazing. That was Sarah Berman and I discussing the court and legal aspects of NXIVM and Keith Raniere's trial based on our full-length conversation about her book, Don't Call It a Cult, on DIE-ALOGUE, the full-length episode, of course, available there. Thank you so much for being a patron. Your support means so much. You are listening to TRIALOGUE, a courtroom conversation, a Patreon-only companion to DIE-ALOGUE, a true crime conversation. Both podcasts are hosted and edited by me, Rebecca Sebastian, audio engineered by Jason Esri. You can follow me at DIALOGUE Pod on all social media platforms. Learn more and sign up for my newsletter at RebeccaSebastian.com. Thank you for listening.